All right, chat. Today we're trying something a little different. Um, Partially because I'm trying to do more stuff for YouTube only, but also I've been getting a lot of questions about, specifically, as you can see, Voice of Victory and Boros Energy. I recently changed my mind and my opinion on the card and its inclusion in the deck, and I was very strong-willed about it before, and I think that that was a mistake. As you can see here, I was wrong. Um, and so I wanted to make a video about the change of my opinion. Initially, my thoughts on the card, how I came to those conclusions, and ultimately actually make something so I could just send it to people instead of explaining it over and over and over again. Part of the job of being a content creator, but probably much easier to just put it in a video and let you watch it. So here we are. All right. So the reason I didn't want to play it originally was because I was viewing the card as an individual card. You do want to do that with cards. You want to view them sort of. It's called in a vacuum, and that way you can like think about it without sort of creating this bias around everything else that goes on in the game around it. You need to understand the power level of the card individually. So when I was doing that, thinking about just the card, the voice of victory doesn't really provide a lot of value by itself. Sure, you get 2 tokens, but they don't stick around. 1/3 body for 2 mana isn't exactly like modern power level in my mind. And the passive of opponents can't cast spells on your turns really doesn't strike anything in me. Doesn't seem that important. Aren't a lot of counter spell decks. You're not trying to set up a combo um, to have your opponent or be able to like have your opponent not be able to interact with removal or something often. Sometimes you are, but not often. So the card itself is like pretty lackluster to me. Uh, Outside of that, sometimes the meta kind of requires you to play cards that are not always amazing by themselves, but because they do something specific. This happened before the Underworld Breach ban with Ranger Captain of Eos, where I think Ranger Captain of Eos is like a pretty powerful magic card. Tutoring up a creature is pretty strong, but overall it is a 3/3 for 3, and that doesn't really have a very high impact overall. Because Breach was so popular and so powerful and so dominant, you needed to have your flex slot sort of try to help alleviate that matchup. Ranger Captain of Eos was a good result to try to do that. Voice of Victory doesn't fit that role. To me, it is not a Ranger Captain. It is kind of a mid-rangey threat. It has a pretty decent power level, but it's not necessarily like the kind of card that's like I want it exactly for this matchup. It's also not the kind of card that's like, oh, this is insanely powerful, like Ocelot Pride or Guide of Souls or Ajani is individually. And then finally, the opportunity cost of having this card in your deck is pretty high. If you want to add a card, you should probably be cutting cards. I didn't really want to cut any cards from the deck. I think the deck list is pretty tight. Every card either is more powerful than Voice or has a very specific matchup dependent reason to be in the deck. And if I don't see a strong reason to add the card, I won't. I don't think I should just add new cards because they're new, sort of thing. Um, Mind you, in the next part, you'll see why my assessment of this overall was flawed. So, my current assessment of this card is pretty drastically different than it was in my initial assessment. And a lot of that has to do with because I was originally viewing the card by itself in a vacuum. Now, I think this is usually a good way to view magic cards. The difference this time is because Boros Energy is just a very smooth, well oiled machine. And although a lot of the cards in the deck function very well by themselves, they don't necessarily it's not fair to the card's power level to only assess them by themselves. If you think about Guide of Souls, Ocelot Pride, Ajani, and Bombardment, or very individually strong magic cards, they are so much better with other cards. Ocelot plus Guide of Souls, very strong combo, doesn't take much to set up. Ajani plus Bombardment, same thing, can close the game by themselves. You add in Flage to the mix, Galvanic, and the entire deck is just very synergistic, very well rounded. Voice of Victory fits into that sort of mold almost perfectly. Is a combo with Guide of Souls. It adds a bunch of energy and life. It's a combo with Ocelot Pride for the turns you gain life. You can copy the Voice of Victory tokens. It's extra creatures for Bombardment. And with Ajani, it's red permanents or extra creatures when you flip the Ajani. With this in mind, it's kind of obvious that I should want to add voice into the deck. Now, the difference here before was I felt that even if all of this was true, even if you add all these things up, there's no reason for me to want to cut cards. The problem I started having with the deck, specifically the version I'm playing, not like the archetype in general, was that I had too many 3-drops. Specifically, Fable the Mirror Breaker didn't feel as impactful for its mana cost, and then there were games where I would draw extra Pyros, extra Flages, extra Fables, and I wouldn't be able to actually cast them or use them. And so I decided I'm going to need to cut some 3-drops. I'm going to need to shave on the mana cost of my deck. And I was like, oh, I'll try Voice of Victory. I wasn't impressed the first few games. It kind of played out how I expected, just a random 2-drop. But then there is specific spots with it where I don't think there are other cards in the format that would do something similar. There's a few times where I hasted it with an Arena of Glory, being able to randomly put 3 creatures into play with a Guide of Souls or a Bombardment really changed the pace of the game. And although Ajani or Flage or Season Pyro would also do something very similar in that spot, I'm already playing a lot of those cards. I'm playing 4 Flage, I'm playing 4 Ajani. I'm only playing 3 Pyros, but again, I wanted to cut on the mana cost. This sort of situation that Voice set up, being very unique, adds an immediate, like, I want this card in my deck more. And so, again, changing how I assess the card, thinking about it in the form of Boros and not just by itself. I think I was wrong in my initial assessment, but also, like, I was just wrong about how I was viewing Boros in general, I think, a little bit before. And thinking that every single card needs to be individually powerful. I don't think that's true. I think that you can add cards that are not as individually powerful for the case of synergy to make sure that your deck gets a little bit more overall. So yeah, that's where I'm at now. I really like the card. So I kind of talked about this before. How did I go from step 0 to 1 to 2 and future steps? My initial assessment was based much in a vacuum. Not really wrong, but not very good in this circumstance. I didn't have an immediate reason to change or try the card. Again, I don't think the deck was broken. I don't think there was something like terribly wrong with it. I just like felt that my mana curve was a little high and I wanted to shave it down. And then once I tried it, I was like, oh, actually, the cost of playing this card isn't that high. It has a lot of value. Even though my deck isn't broken in either sense, like insanely good or insanely bad, maybe adding this card can add a little bit of value here and there, and it can't make the deck worse. So, might as well. And then some amount of that was laziness. I didn't want to think about how to change the deck. I didn't want to think about what to cut. I didn't want to think about how this card changes the pacing of play, where it applies. Goes back to the if it's not broken, don't fix it sort of thing. I don't want to just try and change a bunch of things if I don't need to, especially if I'm doing a reasonable amount of winning. It's obviously very flawed when it comes to card assessment or trying to raise my win rate or trying to get better. So finally, like and subscribe. This is It's a pretty short and sweet breakdown of why I like Voice of Victory now, why I didn't like it before, and what changed. If you enjoy this, want more of it, let me know. If you have any more questions or concerns, or you just want to say that I'm an idiot, hit the whatever. Okay, thanks, bye.